This meeting will come to order. This is a meeting of the Policy Committee of the Bloomington Monroe County Metropolitan Planning Organization. Can we please get a call of the roll?
Samples. Oh, mine's not.
No, it's working.
No.
You said it.
That was turned off again.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. Samples.
Pam, are you here?
Oh, here.
We're doing a roll call,
Thank you.
I suppose, if you will.
Please guide me, I need help.
Is everyone mics on? No? They should be okay to work. Let's just,
Do we have a roll call vote, please? A roll call, rather?
We're trying, Steve.
let's just go down the line and have everyone introduce themselves and tell who they're representing and if they're a proxy. So we'll
Sarah
start-
Ryder-Band, Citizens Advisory Committee of the MPO.
Kate Wiltz, Monroe County Council. Are we supposed to tell them about us?
I'm Pamela Samples, President of Ellisville Town Council.
Lisa Ridge, Monroe County Highway Department Director.
Andrew Seabour, serving as proxy for Mayor Hamilton.
Doug Horn, Bloomington Public Transit Corporation Board of Directors.
Jenny Giffens, proxy for Julie Thomas, Monroe County Commissioners.
Margaret Clements, President of the Monroe County Plan Commission.
Jason Bannock, Indiana University.
Hey, Nickel here for the City of Bloomington Public Works Department and proxy for Adam Wason, Public Works Director.
Jillian
Kinsey is here online as part of the Bloomington Plan Commission.
Chris?
Olin, NDOT?
Anyone else I can't see?
No, you're it.
Otherwise, I'm Steve Voland, representative from the Bloomington City Council and the chair. Thank you, everyone, for checking in. Let's take a look briefly at the agenda. We'll have approval of the agenda, approval of minutes, communications from the chair. We'll hear reports from the Technical Advisory Committee and the Citizens Advisory Committee. We'll hear reports from MPO staff, including the INDOT fiscal year 22 to 26 statewide transportation improvement program status report. Under old business, we'll hear the Monroe County Coordinated Human Services Transportation Plan update. Under new business, we'll hear the fiscal year 2020 to 2024 TIP amendment and the same for fiscal year 2022 to 2026, item number DES 2200-146. We'll hear public comment on matters not included on the agenda, limited to 5 minutes per speaker. We'll have communications from committee members on matters not included on the agenda, including topic suggestions for future agendas. We'll have an announcement of upcoming meetings, and then we'll adjourn. Let's start with approval of the agenda. Is there a motion?
Second.
Is there a second? We have a motion and a second. Can we get a voice vote on this, or do we have to have a roll call vote?
Since it's a hybrid meeting, all votes must be roll call.
Okay, so can we have a roll call vote, please?
Sure. Samples.
Yes.
Ridge.
Yes.
Seaboard.
Yes.
Horn.
Yes.
Wiltz.
Yes.
Clements.
Because an item that was supposed to be on the agenda for the last two meetings is not included, I cannot vote yes on this agenda, so my vote is no.
Banner.
Yes.
Githens.
No.
Kinsey.
Yes.
Ryderband.
Yes.
Wallman.
Yes.
Nickel.
Yes.
Volan.
Yes.
Thank you. I have 11-2.
Okay. Thank you. The agenda is approved. We'll move now to approval of the minutes for March 11, 2022. Do we have a motion?
Move to approve minutes.
We need a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second on the minutes. Is there any discussion of the minutes? Because I can't really see everybody easily, I would ask my eyes in the room, such as staff members, to call out people if they raise their hands. Hearing no comments on the minutes, can we have a roll call vote on their approval?
Sure. Ridge,
Abstain.
Seaboard,
Yes.
Horn,
Yes.
Wiltz,
Yes.
Clements,
No.
Bannock,
Yes.
Githens,
Abstain?
Kinsey,
Yes.
Reiterband,
Yes.
Wallman,
Yes.
Nickel,
Yes.
Volin,
Yes.
Samples.
Okay, those minutes are approved, it seems. We'll now go to communication with the chair. I regret that I can't be there in person today. Happy to be able to attend the meeting at all, but I am out of town, so I appreciate everyone's patience and forbearance while I conduct this meeting remotely. Other than that, I do want, I express regret to Commissioner Clements about not including the item that she wanted to talk about. That is my fault. And I will make sure that it's on the agenda for the May meeting. So again, my apologies to her for not being on the ball on this point. I have received the letter she's concerned about, and I do share her concern. So with that, let's move to reports from officers and/or committees. Is there a report from the Technical Advisory Committee?
Just a brief one from the TAC. Our meeting last month was canceled due to a lack of a quorum. We were navigating the return back to in-person meetings. So we had enough people, but unfortunately they were all virtual. And we didn't have enough people actually in the room. So we'll reconvene at our next meeting later this week.
Thank you. Any questions for the Technical Advisory Committee? If none, let's go to the Citizens Advisory Committee.
Mr. Volin, I'm curious to know how the TAC is actually going to procure enough bodies in the room to meet the bylaws requirements of 50% of their number, which I think is 27 or so. Does the TAC have a means of doing that?
I think we had a lot of people available for the last meeting. There was just confusion over whether they needed to actually be in attendance physically or virtually. So next meeting, I think we're more clear on that. We'll be able to convene a meeting.
It was the first month that hybrid meetings were the rules, so I'm not surprised, but we look forward to hearing that you were able to conduct a meeting, Mr. Nickel. Ms. Reiterband, would you like to report on the Citizens Advisory Committee?
Yeah, the CAC met and we were present, and for the first time in more than 2 years, which was exciting. We did recommend the approval by the Policy Committee of the TIP amendment, which will appear before us today. And once again, we reiterated our approval and hope for the implementation of the Monroe County Consolidated Human Services Transportation Plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the CAC? I can't see any, so if there's any hands raised, if the staff would acknowledge them. Seeing none, let's go to reports from MPO staff.
In the packet, we have a memorandum, and this quotes from the Indiana Department of Transportation, the Director of Technical Services, Roy Nunley. We have in here the quote that the central office team was to submit the revised fiscal year 2022-2026 statewide transportation improvement program to the federal partners, the Federal Highway Administration, and Federal Transit Administration. That was to have been submitted on the 31st, I believe, of March. Actually, it was not submitted until today. So central office continues the pursuit of submitting the statewide transportation improvement program. In the meantime, the fiscal year 2022-2026 transportation improvement program for our urban area has been approved, and projects that are on contract lettings are ongoing. There hasn't been any delay up to this point in time. And that's all I have to report.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Martin on the MPO staff report? Hearing none, we'll move on to old business, the Monroe County Coordinated Human Services Transportation Plan update. Who's presenting on this?
I am.
All right, Mr. Martin, please go ahead.
Some of the members may recall we presented this at last month's meeting, and it turned out that there were a few holes that still had to be plugged in terms of responsible parties for implementation of goals. The staff went back and worked with Bloomington Transit, Rural Transit on the responsibilities for those parties. Those are in your packet. They're highlighted in yellow in terms of where it says the responsible parties are, and then we went in and added the responsible parties after that. Now, in terms of the technical memorandum, which we included in the packet last month, nothing has changed. It remains the same in that the plan itself was actually funded by the Indiana Department of Transportation Public Transit Division. It fulfills the requirements of the Federal Transit Administration for what's called enhanced mobility for seniors and individuals with disabilities for a locally developed plan. It involved public participation, extensive public participation. It included Indiana Department of Transportation serving as a direct recipient for the funds. And then it identified and assessed existing resources and unmet local needs. And from those, it developed a set of goals. And the set of goals that were in there outlined who the responsible parties were to be for those goals, either on an immediate, a short-term, or on a long-term basis. And then that's all I have, unless anybody has any questions.
Okay, thank you. Are there questions for Mr. Martin on the plan? Again, if those who would like to have attention would be called out by staff, that would be helpful.
Margaret, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm just am bringing to the attention of the committee that this Metropolitan Planning location map is not something that I think has broad consensus across the community or even across the coordinating agencies. It is on page 6 of the RLS study, and the boundaries of the Bloomington urbanized area seem to me to be rather aggrandized and certainly in contest given the overwhelming public opposition to annexation across all of the areas that we've just witnessed through the remonstration against annexation. So even though the boundaries on this map look in favor of what the administration may be wanting to do, that the public is really overwhelmingly opposed. And I'd like to ask, with how much was RLS and Associates paid to do this study? And I'd like to know the full amount of the consultant fee paid for this study.
RLS was under contract with the Indiana Department of Transportation Public Transit Division. The MPO did not pay for the study.
Do you know how much they were paid for this study?
No, I'm not.
Could you provide us with that information?
I
at
can
the
provide
next-
you with that information, but I don't know what it is because that was a statewide
It
contract.
would be nice to have that information. Thank
Okay,
you.
it was in a lump sum where it included several MPOs together. It wasn't broken out, I don't think, individually by individual MPO because it included Anderson, Muncie, and a number of other what I would call Group 2 cities, which had coordinated human services transportation plans that were outdated.
Well, I also take at issue the overstatement that a lot of public involvement occurred. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there further questions
I have a
from
question.
members to staff?
I have a question, and that is,
Please go ahead.
can you tell us where that particular map of the urbanized area was generated from? Is that from census data? How is that particular map created or generated?
It's based on the census. It's based on the 2010 census, and it's the urbanized area boundary. And there's an official map, if you will. This included the study area. It includes all of Monroe County as a study area because it included rural transit and rural transit's area. Even though it was outside of the urbanized area, it was looking at what we would call the metropolitan planning area. And the metropolitan planning area includes all of Monroe County. So the map was actually put in there by the consultant, not ourselves, and it had no other intent behind its placement in the study.
And the other question is, can you just detail a little bit of how our consultant attempted to do public input in a time of COVID? What extent she reached out to community?
We went through actual meetings, and then we went through virtual meetings. A set of virtual meetings. We went through what I would call a consulting group of constituents, constituent agencies. There was also a survey online. The survey was posted on the city's website. That was posted on the city's website for several months. I can't tell you exactly how many months, whether it was 2 or 3 or maybe it was 4. But it was all posted on there where we asked for the input. It was also in the Technical Advisory Committee, which was published online. It was included in the Citizens Advisory Committee, published online. The Policy Committee was published online. So there were, I can't go through exactly how many opportunities there were for public knowledge, but there were ample opportunities, just like we do for the Transportation Improvement Program or the Metropolitan Transportation Plan or other plans that we do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions from members on this item?
Yes, may I ask 2 questions, please? This is Penny.
Please go ahead. Yes.
Why was 2010 census data used instead of 2020? That's very old data. Then secondly, with regard to people with disabilities, why didn't people reach out through Stonebelt, through Life Designs, and through other organizations which are here, which have much, much more direct contact with people with disabilities?
Okay, in answer to the first question, why the 2010 census data? Because that was the only data available when the study was initiated and while it was in progress. We still don't have 2010 census data ourselves. We don't have an urbanized area boundary established at this point in time because the Census Bureau is still publishing the rules on that. They just finalized a rule in terms of density. I think it was just 2 weeks ago that they published that. So the census data itself will not be available for planning purposes in terms of accuracy. And there was a gross undercount also, not only in Monroe County and Bloomington, but in other areas across the entire state.
That's specifically the 2020 census, not the 2010.
2010, yeah, the 2020 census, I'm sorry. So the 2010 census was the default, and they were directed by the Indiana Department of Transportation to use the 2010 census. And then in answer to the second question about the agencies that are out there, we did contact them. We provided a we provided a list to the consultant of all the service agencies that were out there. In fact, I've got that somewhere if it's not included in this plan. We shared that with the Technical Advisory Committee and the Citizens Advisory Committee. I can see Sarah's nodding her head. It was an exhaustive list. And we also coordinated it with the Community Services Department in the city of Bloomington, which does outreach to all of those underserved populations to ensure that we were reaching not only the underserved populations, but also the populations that had marginal English or no English proficiency whatsoever. Does that answer your question, Penny?
Yes, thank you. I think I'll need to reach out to my friends at Stone Mountain Life Designs to ask why I didn't receive things like this, because we have a son that receives services through both those agencies. So,
okay.
Further questions? I think I see Mr. Horn.
Yes, thanks. Pat, when will this study be done again?
Probably 10 years from now.
I understand that, okay.
Yeah.
In that data is old in this study, and new data is on the cusp. Representing an agency that is called on to perform related to this, I'm wondering if there's an opportunity to update the information locally so that our corporation can respond effectively and in true time, rather than looking at something that is outdated.
Yeah. The last study was done, I think it was done in 2012, and it used the 2010 census data at that time in 2012. This one, we were attempting, I had postponed this, I'd asked them to postpone this for a year, as it was, until we had the 2020 census data. But the Federal Transit Administration came down and made a decision that it was too long in the tooth, to use a scientific term, and therefore we needed to, the state of Indiana needed to update that plan. So the effort was initiated by the Department of Transportation Public Transit section and division, and that's where we went from there. Now what I can do is I can reach out to them, to the program manager who oversees this particular section of the FTA program. I can reach out to him and ask him if there's any initiative to update this within the next 5 years or so. And I would expect that there will be, given the fact that there was such controversy over the census data and undercount. The fact the undercount happened during the very months of the pandemic, the early stages of the pandemic, and then also the fact that there have been additional funds directed by Congress to the Federal Transit Administration to serve the underserved populations. And then also there's the national administration emphasis on the underserved populations too. So in answer to your question, yes, we'll reach out to them and ask them what their timeline is, and we'll tell them that we expect to update this within the next 5 years.
That would be much appreciated. As you may all know, the Transit Corporation is working on a strategic plan, and it is our intention to incorporate this document and its recommendations as part of that plan. However, if we're dealing with something that is 10 years behind the times, forgive us if we don't take it with, or if we take it with a grain of salt. And try to project forward to accomplish goals, at least the directional goals that the document has. But it would be very helpful to have something that is a little bit more up to date as we spend millions of dollars in a strategic plan initiative moving forward. So it's just a friendly comment. Appreciate all the work. I think the information is helpful, but it would be more helpful if it were closer to the day. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. From a professional planning standpoint, we wholly agree. Oops, my monitor went off. We wholly agree, and I believe the Indiana Department of Transportation's Public Transit Division staff would also wholly agree on this. It was just that Federal Transit Administration put down the mandate, thou shalt, and so therefore thou shalt. That's what we did. And the consultant did the best they could, too. Consultant also used to live here in Bloomington, deeply familiar with the area, worked with Bloomington Transit for a number of years. So if anything, we, this urban area in Monroe County, received what I would call a custom approach versus, well, a 40,000-foot view that you would normally get from a consulting firm. So thank you. I will pass that along. Yes.
One more question.
Penny?
Thank
This
you.
is listed as a draft at this point, so.
It has draft because this committee has not finalized it. And once the committee finalizes or accepts the document, then the draft stamp will come off. And all of you will receive what I would call the final document.
So if we reject it because of the old census data, what happens then?
Well, if you reject it because of the old census data, then we'll just send that to the Department of Transportation and ask them, what do we do now? Because it's their study. This is the Department of Transportation study for our urban area. It's not an MPO document. Yes, Kate.
Thank you. I see Jillian Kinsey with her hand raised.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, thanks for acknowledging. A question sort of in line with what Pat and Penny were just discussing. What is our obligation or the consequence of this from INDOT's estimation? What are we responsible for and will be held accountable for, particularly with regard to the goals and priorities that are identified on the latter pages in the document, which I also have a question about why they're highlighted there on page 43 and 44. But I wonder if you can talk a little bit about what the consequences of this work.
Well,
thank you.
the consequences are every urbanized area must have a updated and current plan. Our plan is 10 years old. If we choose not to update this plan, then Federal Transit Administration could potentially find us in non-compliance, is what I would say in terms of having a current plan. And I'm sorry, what was the second part of your question?
The second question was in reference to the highlighted priority column on table 6.
Yeah.
It's highlighted, but I don't know what that means or signifies.
Table 6. Yeah, we were given a PDF form of the draft plan, and the staff attempted to fill in the box, the highlight boxes under priority, and the PDF version would not allow that. Therefore, the staff instead, over in the left-hand column, left side of that under the objectives/strategy description, we placed in there instead a priority in what I would call bold letters. In other words, for strategy number 1.1, it was high. Strategy 1.2, high. Strategy 2.1, medium, and on down the line. So instead, we just placed it in the box immediately to the left of that. And like I said, we didn't have access to an editable version. We were able to edit, but only to a certain point. We couldn't edit that box.
I see.
It looks,
okay, that's
it looks odd, I know.
Yes, it does. It wasn't clear to me whose prioritization that was referencing in terms of highs and mediums and et cetera.
Yeah,
so I'm glad to know that those bolded words should actually be in that column.
Yes.
But just to be clear then, those are staff identified priorities.
Staff identified priorities in consultation with Bloomington Transit and Rural Transit, yes.
Okay.
We didn't identify those ourselves. We did that with the partner agencies.
Okay, I don't know if this is an appropriate moment to just comment on that. I understand some
It
of
is,
the.
go ahead.
It is appropriate or not appropriate, Steve? Sorry.
Yeah, it's appropriate. Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to then comment that in relation to what some of the concerns that were just expressed about the involvement of different audiences and the age of census information, in some ways, I understand those concerns, and the timing is not great for many of those things. However, I would urge people to look at the objectives and strategies here, and I don't find those objectionable. They may not be rooted necessarily in census data, which could be concerning. I don't think that they're overall concerning or objectionable. In fact, I think they're exactly what we need to see. Greater collaboration, implementation of wayfinding, all of these things to me are, not really dependent on an updated census. Certainly the census updated information could provide more nuance to some of these things, and I'd welcome that. But I think overall they're reasonable priorities and things that we would probably believe in. So I would just urge, not throwing away some really excellent objectives that could garner the community some much needed resources through grants and other opportunities, in light of not getting current census information. So, I get the trade-offs here, and I certainly would want new information, but I think overall the objectives and strategies seem to be very current. So thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would
Go ahead,
note-
Mr. Martin.
Thank you. I would say, and we made one sidebar consultation at the last meeting, after the last meeting, about these objectives, in that the consultant went through and looked for it was a SWOT analysis, strengths and weaknesses analysis, and they found very few weaknesses. So therefore, these goals represent what I would call low-hanging fruit. In other words, they found very little in the way of gaps, service gaps, based on current programming for Bloomington Transit and rural transit. And so some of these objectives, like, participation in the in-cost and other statewide organizations, well, that's a given. Every organization does that. Every rural transit organization does that in the state of Indiana. So some of these are what I would call low-hanging fruit, and some of them we're already working on, such as the implement the wayfinding. We're constantly moving that, especially with Bloomington Transit doing a route evaluation, route implementation plan. And then also for the infrastructure, we're constantly working on that too. So yes, we agree with you.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments from members? I have a question if nobody else does.
I had just a comment, if that's okay.
Please, go ahead.
I just wanted to point out for the public, or those who might not be reading through our entire packet, that there are data in this report, this transportation plan, that are much more recent than 2010, and they in several places used 2019 five-year estimate data from the Census Bureau, and so I just wanted to make it clear that there are some things that are old, but they didn't just use 2010 data for some of these figures in the transportation plan.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Because if not, I'd like to ask a couple of questions.
I'm
First
sorry,
of all,
Steve. I
sorry,
had
go
my
ahead.
hand up. Thank you. Thank you all for these comments. I think it does clarify a few steps and a few things. I'd just follow up kind of as a general summary related to Bloomington Transit. The map that has been brought into question on page 6. Will this map in some iteration or in some near future report be updated to reflect 2020 data? It may not be specific to this particular analysis or study, but will that map be available in the near term?
If the, if the Department of Transportation, Public Transit Division decides to update the plan, they would update the map with the new urban area boundaries. I mean, the urban area boundaries that are shown there right now are the ones that are established by the 2010 census, as far as I know. I mean, the consultant generated this map. We didn't. It has RLS.
I'm sorry, I thought it was a footnoted or a semi-footnoted reference by the consultant that something produced at a state level.
That was a statewide survey. They did a statewide survey.
So that did not apply to them.
Right. That was in there. Yeah, that called into question in the Citizens Advisory Committee meeting. One of the members called that into question about the survey, and the answer was that's a statewide survey of all of the service providers under this program, under this FTA section program. And that, because if you did it on a localized level, your sample size would be exceedingly small, and the idea was to find out where there are gaps statewide.
Is there enough data, time, et cetera, available that this particular map could be updated by this MPO to provide helpful guidance specific to the key call-outs in the map as we move into the near future?
Well, the MPO wouldn't update it. It'd be the state of Indiana, because it's a state of Indiana study.
I understand that the state of Indiana can do it.
Yeah.
I just wondered, as we're trying to implement this and are trying to act on the ground here in the MPO area, if we could get a map that we could actually call our own and say, yes, this is indeed what the situation is here as we move through these goals and objectives. Is that something that we might
Once
be
that
able to do?
becomes available, yes.
Thank you. We may go in that direction, but I just wanted to see if that was a possibility. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Horn. You were asking a similar question that I wanted to ask, and so I'd like to do that now. Mr. Martin, who defines urbanized area? What is the definition of it? And who makes the determination of what counts as urbanized area?
Well, the Census Bureau defines the urbanized area, and the 2010 census urbanized area is based on a density formula, and then the 2020 census data will also, the urbanized area will be determined by the Census Bureau, and that will be based on a different density level than the 2010 census. And preliminary indication is the Census Bureau will tighten up the urbanized areas. In terms of density, they're looking at almost doubling the density in their, what I would call their census districts or census zones. So they make all the determinations. We don't, they consult with us in terms of rounding the boundaries maybe, but that's it.
So just to be clear, the phrase urbanized area or any indication of a so-called urbanized area is a completely different determination than the city's own boundary, whether proposed or current. It's a matter of a density formula determined at a higher level than us.
Correct. Yes. Yeah, I mean, urbanized areas determined by the Census Bureau. Municipal boundaries, county boundaries, those are determined by their own jurisdictions. Yeah.
Right.
And metropolitan planning area is
to that end, the other.
I'm sorry.
Right.
I'm sorry, I interrupted.
Well, to that other end, that's okay. The other question is related to this. So my understanding of the definition of a metropolitan area is that it's made by the Department of Commerce, and it's actually the census is part of the Bureau of the Department of Commerce, but it's done in the third year after a decennial census. That the the metropolitan area definitions for the country were not determined until 2013 for the 2010 census. Does that not play a role here?
It will.
I mean, should we even expect the definition of the Bloomington metropolitan area to be updated before next year?
Will it be updated next year or not, I don't know, because there was so much controversy over this past census. Controversy from a political standpoint in terms of who do you count?
Right.
In other words, do you count everybody?
Right.
Or do you count just certain population groups? And then the other question was the undercount, particularly in the underserviced and minority populations. And this was nationwide, not only in our own area. And the undercount coincided with the onset of the pandemic.
Right. Now, I mean, here the students were all sent home 2 weeks before Census Day, and no clear guidance was given that they were to specify that they were supposed to be counting where they were going to school, which is what the census has always said. So, yeah, I agree that this is a significant issue that can anybody, at least in a college town, trust the 2020 census under those circumstances. So just to make a concluding comment like everyone else had, like I don't have a problem with the use of 2010 data. It'll be nice to see it updated, especially if we can do it in a 5-year time frame, considering how much, as you said, the controversy has been. But I agree with Ms. Kinsey that we shouldn't let the question of this map change the benefit of the recommendations in the report. Any other questions or comments from members of the MPO?
I have one. I notice here that
Please go ahead.
On page 6 of underneath the map, it says that the map relies largely on the American Community Survey and nothing as robust really as the census, the 2010 or the 2020 census. And the American Community Survey is only administratively derived, and it can really result in some distortions of the data depending on how it was administered. So I look at this and I look at really an overall level of an unwillingness to be transparent by the MPO staff in this administration, especially concerning things like a traffic study that we've been asking for since 2019, only to find out at our last meeting that the administration has been in possession of a traffic study back involving the new hospital dating back to 2017. And members of this committee and elected members of this committee have been requesting for that study, that very study, aggressively since 2019. So taken together, I'm just having a hard time looking at an overall unwillingness to be transparent with members of this committee. And I feel that this MPO, in order to fulfill its duties, there has to be a higher level of transparency, and this map gives me pause, and so does this draft proposal. So I just have to say that no matter how people may assert that they don't believe in the 2020 census and they may want to take it to issue and to challenge it, et cetera, and we know that census is being challenged by our city administration. I take just an equal opposition, if not more, to the use of the American Community Survey in planning for our city and our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other final comments?
Yes.
I would like to ask Ms. Clements, do you believe that this map has a material, this map in this report has a material effect on the recommendations of this report?
I have more questions than I have answers pertaining to what is contained in this document, and I'd need to know a lot more about the methodology before all this money should be spent fulfilling an idea that we don't know enough about.
Okay, thank you. Any further comments?
Yes.
Ms.
I do.
Ryder-Ban.
Thank you. So one, I read what sat below that map on page 6, and it does not state anything about the map having been generated from the survey. That's not what it states at all. That's number one. Number two is I'm delighted to hear that BT is undergoing a strategic plan. I'm very excited about that idea. I'm wondering if the federal government actually requires and has in the transportation department a requirement that we review this on a 5-year basis or a 10-year basis. Is there something actually writ in stone that tells us how often we need to review this plan? That's number one of the questions. And number two is, where would the funds come from? Were we as an MPO going to actually ask for a 5-year review? Would that come out of the Unified Work Plan? Would that come from, it obviously goes across LPAs, so it can't come from one LPA. So where does that funding come from to do a study? And I'm guessing, based on previous studies that we've done, that it would cost in the range of at least $50,000. Is that roughly higher? Great. Well, could you give us an idea of what the cost would be to do this kind of study again in 5 years when we finally have the data, and where that money would come from? Thank you.
Okay, and answer your first question about how often, that's determined by the Federal Transit Administration, and that's, I don't know the decision-making behind that process. It's just that Federal Transit Administration looked at the state of Indiana, looked at all of the plans for all of the urbanized areas of the state of Indiana, some of which were more current, some of which had longer vintage. This one was one of the longer vintages. Ourselves, Anderson, trying to think, Evansville, Muncie, and a few others. I went out and I did a look. And they made the Federal Transit Administration made the determination, told the state of Indiana, Public Transit Division, hello, you need to update these plans. Indiana Department of Transportation set aside state funds to pay for this study, to hire the consultant. They made the selection under whatever the state procurement rules are. And they are the ones who hired the consultant. They are the ones who funded the plan. This is a state plan, not an MPO plan. And in terms of the source of the funding would come from the state of Indiana, because it's a state of Indiana plan.
But if we as an MPO wanted to set funds aside to generate our own reproduction, so to speak, of this plan in 5 years, how would that go through this policy committee? Where would we find the funding? Obviously, we would get it from the state, which means we would get it from the federal government, but where would it fit into our funding?
Well, I don't know if we would even be eligible. I mean, first of all, the Federal Transit Administration would have to agree to say, well, Department of Transportation would have to ask, say, hello, they wish to update the plan, and Federal Transit Administration would have to say yes or no, because they might say, well, it's only been 5 years. Or they may say, oh yeah, that makes sense, because all of the other urbanized areas may need that given the new data. So the query goes to the Federal Transit Administration from the state of Indiana. Federal Transit Administration makes a determination on whether it's eligible or not. If it's eligible, then are the funds available to do that? And if they're not if federal funds are not available, then we're stopped right there. So, I mean, are you talking about updating this plan with 100% local money?
Well, that's what I was asking. When I heard the suggestion that this be updated again, I was just wondering, how would we as an MPO possibly fund such an endeavor?
We would have to have permission from the Indiana Department of Transportation as the administrative pass-through, and we'd also have to have permission from the Federal Transit Administration. And then, given that permission, there would have to be funds available. And I don't know if funds will be available or not, given those change. If there's a new administration on the national level, that priority may change for public transportation.
Thank you.
I hope that's a complex answer, but it's a complex question too at the same time. Okay.
And I'd like to also bring this discussion to a close if we can, because we have more business to conduct today before the meeting ends, unless there's any more pressing questions.
I'd like to move approval of this.
I still have one. I'm sorry.
Who is speaking?
This is Penny. I was waving my hand earlier. I thought Pat
Ms.
was going to
Gittens,
call
go
on me.
ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I agree with Ms. Kinsey that the goals are really admirable. They're the things that we should be working on. I would like to see included in this the number of unanswered requests for service that rural transit received by year, because I think that points to huge gaps, and a lot of their funding comes from both the federal and the state money, or state monies. And so I think there's a gap that really has been ignored.
Thank you. All right, is there a motion on the table?
I move that we approve this strategic plan.
Need a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Can we have a roll call vote, please, on this motion
Sure.
to approve this plan?
Seabour,
Yes.
Horn,
Yes.
Wiltz,
Yes.
Clements,
No.
Bannock,
Yes.
Githens,
No.
Kinsey,
Yes.
Ryderband,
Yes.
Wallman,
Yes.
Nickel,
Yes.
Volan,
Yes.
Samples,
Yes.
Ridge.
No.
Thank you. That is 10-3.
The motion is approved. The Monroe County Coordinated Human Services Transportation Plan update has been approved. We move on now to new business. Is there a motion on the TIP amendment?
I believe Chris Wallman has
Does it need to be introduced?
I have a comment.
A comment, Mr. Wallman.
Just to give some background on this TIP amendment.
Well, hang on a second. Does it need to be introduced, Mr. Martin?
Well,
This is new business.
well, I can do
Does it need a motion and a second to be introduced and heard?
I can do the introduction. I mean, the introduction is a fiscal year 2020, 2024.
No, I meant formally like, is this is, I'm sorry, I meant formally like, is this, because we're voting on it, do we need to have a motion and a second to introduce it? I guess if the answer is not, then
Not.
we can go ahead with Mr. Wallman.
Yes.
Yes, we'll let
All right.
Mr. Wallman introduce the project.
All right, thank you. Some background on this project. This is a kind of an oddball. Some money was, some funding was identified, some funding opportunities were identified in central office from our local programs folks for off-system institutional bridges. And so the this particular location is North Eagleston Avenue over the Indiana Railroad. There's some errors on this tip amendment. So the sponsor will not be Indiana Railroad. Actually, I think IU owns the structure. We need to clean up who the sponsor will be and also some of the funding splits and funding sources for this before we reintroduce. So I would make a motion that we would postpone consideration of this tip amendment until a future meeting.
Any objection? Well, we have a motion. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? I can't see, so please someone call out if there's anybody.
Can you tell us when you anticipate that we would have some of that information available so that we can look at this tip amendment and approve it?
So we're working through setting up some meetings, I think, for next week with IU and our local programs director. I would say within a month we might get updated information to the CAC and the technical advisory committee. So.
And while the CAC recommended approval of this, we certainly had questions. And so I'm really delighted that you've suggested that we postpone until we can answer some of those questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions on the motion? I have one if nobody else does. Mr. Wallman, any chance that that bridge project is sort of a generalism and it's also going to address the railroad bridge over 10th Street as well?
I think this is only the bridge over the railroad here at North Eagleston. So
that's too bad.
This is the only location for this project.
All right, that's too bad. Well, thanks for that anyway. Any other questions on the motion before we call the roll to postpone? Seeing none, can we please have a roll call vote of the motion to postpone?
Sure. Horn.
Yes.
Wiltz.
Yes.
Clements.
Yes.
Bannock. Yes.
Githens.
Yes.
Kinsey.
Yes.
Reiterband.
Yes.
Wallman.
Yes.
Nickel.
Yes.
Bowen.
Yes.
Bowen.
Yes.
Samples.
Yes.
Ridge.
Yes.
Seaboard.
Yes.
Thank you. 13-0.
That's unanimous. We will postpone that to a later meeting. Let's move now to public comment on matters not included on the agenda. These are limited to 5 minutes per speaker. How many people would like to address the MPO? Can we please see a show of hands, both on Zoom and in person? And can I get a count from somebody in the room? Is there any member of the public who would like to address the policy committee? Last call. All right, let's move on now to communications from members of the committee on matters not included on the agenda. Are there any members who have any communications?
I guess I would just like to say that there are innumerable webinars that are really applicable to the work that we do here. And I attend a lot of those. A lot of them you don't actually have to be present and can see them after the fact. If anyone wants to be part of my communication link on those, please let me know.
Thank you. Further communications from members? Ms. Reiterband, I would be interested to hear about some of those webinars. And I think it would be interesting if you could suggest specific ones after the fact at future meetings that you think would be of interest. I would find that very interesting.
I think that we should.
If there are no other.
I think we should be asking the Department of Transportation why they're asking for coordinated human transportation services transportation plans in a time frame that doesn't fit with when we can get up-to-date census information and up-to-date information on the urbanized areas. It would seem that those things should be coordinated, and they're not. It's the timeline. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Further communications from members? Any suggestions for future agendas? I think that maybe Ms. Githens has just suggested one. Are there any specific suggestions for future agendas? If not, it's okay. Okay, moving to upcoming meetings, can we please have an announcement of future meetings?
I'm sorry.
The TAC will be meeting on May the 13th at 10 a.m. It is a hybrid meeting. CAC will be meeting on April.
In what room?
That's not right.
I think the policy.
Yeah, that's wrong. It's
date's
policy
wrong.
committee that will be meeting May 13th.
Yeah.
As a hybrid meeting. I would remind members that by our laws and regulations here for hybridization, that you can only be virtual twice in a row. The policy committee will meet May 13th. The April 27th at 10 a.m. TAC will meet, and on April 27th at 6:30 p.m. the CAC will meet. Both of those also are hybrid, and again, more than 50% or greater need to be in person. I move to adjourn.
Thank you, Ms. Ryder-Band. Just a second. Any other announcements? If we have are those meetings, the things on the agenda are printed incorrectly, is that right?
Correct.
It says Technical Advisory Committee, May 13th at 10 a.m. These need to be corrected, don't they?
We're correctly incorrect, yes.
Okay.
We will adjust.
If we can,
we will adjust those, yeah. We went through 5 reviews and still this came in, yeah.
Okay. If there's no other objection, then we have a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. We are adjourned. Thank you all. See you in person next month.